Your Excellencies, Nobel Prize laureates, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome to the first Nobel Prize Dialogue in Australia. My name is Owen Gaffney. I'll be your host for this evening. That was the incredible Dobby, and telling us the history of decision-making in the Murray-Darling Basin in 3 minutes, 20 seconds. So we're here to discuss decision-making. And, you know, decision-making is our superpower. We can cooperate and we can come together on these vast scales. And this has created this incredible world around us. But also, somehow the problems keep getting bigger too. You know, the risks of nuclear war, climate change, water resources at huge scales, misinformation, disinformation, you know, and now we have artificial intelligence and the risks but opportunities that come with that. These issues are planetary scale issues we're now talking about, and they're at a species level and across multiple generations. So to manage expectations, we're not going to solve all of these problems this evening, even with brilliant minds here, including 3 Nobel Prize laureates. But we will talk about how we can have more constructive dialogues, and how do we build trust based on a common humanity. We'll talk about democracy and how we can value democracy and how democracy can evolve for these new changing circumstances. Fundamentally, we believe we've made so much progress because fundamentally we believe in people and the people are good. And the first 2 very good people I'd like to invite up on stage, Auntie Maxine for a Welcome to Country and Verity Firth from UNSW.
Nuggambi, 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 which means welcome, 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 or hello, hello, hello in Dharawal language. My name is Auntie Maxine Ryan and I'm from the Aboriginal community of Botany Bay, and I belong to the Dharawal Nation. But I would like to acknowledge the Bidjigal, the Gadjigal clan, the land we're meeting on today, and acknowledge my elders, past, present and those emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that are here this evening. I welcome you all here and acknowledge why we're still here, because of my elders, my ancestors, all the hard work they've done for us to keep on surviving. We are the oldest culture in the world. We're over 65,000 years old, and that's why we're still standing here today, because of my elders and my ancestors taking care of the land, the water, because the water's very important to me too, not just the land. As I grew up on a mission, we got our rations and everything else, but we still had the tucker there. We had the bush tucker and we had the ocean. And that's why it's my job to look after the water and to look after the land and be there for them, because that's where they live. They live on the land and that's where they come from. And it's just the same as the ocean. And we are here and caring for it, as we do every day. And because I'm passionate about going into schools and acknowledging the young generations, I love acknowledging them, because all the hard learning that they do lots of hard learning on looking after the land and the water too. And as I do all the time, I welcome all different cultures into Australia. They become Australian citizens, and we teach them about the land and the water. And the children, they put their hand up because they might come from that family of that background to become Australian citizens. And they tell me their stories, and I love listening, because I'm listening and learning about their culture, and they're listening and learning about my culture. And we're all living together as one in Australia, as Australia is a multicultural country. And as I say to them, everywhere you go, you will be walking past or sitting next to some other culture. So you must respect them, because we are different. We look different, we smell different, we eat different food, we talk different languages, we wear different clothes. And that's what I teach the children about, that big word, respect. Respect each other's cultures, as we are different. But we're still here in Australia living together as one, and we're sharing each other's cultures. As my family is a multicultural family. I have different cultures. I've got 7 different cultures in my family. So I understand a lot of cultures, and I'm still learning every day. And the children, they are our future. They are our leaders. They will be running my country one day. And we are all here today, and we are all role models for that young generation on all the hard work that we do. Whether you come to work, whether you come to university, you go to your communities, you are the role models. So keep that and cherish that, because them young generation, that's who they look up to. They look up to us. And I'm proud to be a role model for my community. And I'm proud that all the young children come up to me to talk to me, because they're learning, as we are. They're role models. And we are teaching them their journeys, because they are going to do lots of journeys as we have. On this beautiful land, Aboriginal land, always was, always will be. So I encourage them to take lots of journeys on this land and care for the land, look after the land, look after my mother, because it's my mother that feeds us. She feeds our plants, our animals, she makes our medicine, and that's how we survive, because we survive from the land, from the plants, from the animals, and that's how we all keep together and survive on what we do. And as I say to the children, I didn't grow up with plastic. I love learning to tell them, I don't want it, get it away. We can live without it. We live for hundreds of years without plastic. We can keep on doing that, because that's killing our environment. And everybody here today, on all the learning that you've done, keep it up. You're not finished yet. The journeys that you'll be taking, you're not finished them either. But enjoy yourself. Have fun while you're doing it. And the university here is a great place to come to. All staff, so nice. All staff, learning. All the students, learning. And that's what I love. I'm passionate about learning. I still learn every day. So on that note, as I am a proud Aboriginal woman, and I don't say goodbye. In my language, I say Nandawabi, and Nandawabi means if I don't see you around, I will see you in the dream time. God bless and take care. Have a great night.
How was that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Maxine, for your welcome to country and for so powerfully connecting us to the land on which we meet tonight. This land was, is and always will be Aboriginal land. Hello everyone, welcome to the Nobel Dialogue at UNSW. My name's Verity Firth and I'm the Vice President of Societal Impact, Equity and Engagement here at the university. It's my real pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. We are extremely proud to be hosting the first Nobel Prize Dialogue in Australia. And as you know and we know, the Nobel Prize is given in recognition of extraordinary contributions to humanity through science, literature and peace. So it really is a privilege for our university to host some of the world's most incredible minds and critical thinkers and celebrate our shared commitment to making the world a better place. Tonight's event, and in order to make the world a better place, we're actually having an event tonight themed around the future of decision making. It's a topic that's especially meaningful today as we navigate the complex and new challenges around the future of our civilization. These are big, tricky, existential problems that need a collective and evidence-based response. However, in an ever-increasing digital world, we see how information, whether true or false, can spread like wildfire. Fiction is touted as fact, artificial intelligence is increasingly mimicking human intelligence, and confidence is often mistaken for wise authority. We must ensure that we don't enter a future where more information than ever is at all of our fingertips, but where we lack the time and, more importantly, the skill to properly process and consider such information. Universities have a vital role in helping society distinguish between trustworthy and non-trustworthy information. We teach the indispensable skill of critical thinking, teaching people how to think, not what to think. So thank you again for coming tonight. I really think you're going to have a wonderful night. Enjoy yourselves, listen, and hopefully you'll go with some excellent insights and ideas. I will be back again shortly for a discussion around fact, fiction and critical thinking with the hilarious and clever Tim Minchin and Nobel laureate and astrophysicist Professor Saul Perlmutter. But first, I want to welcome to the stage Sandra Brandon, CEO of the Nobel Prize Outreach. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Nobel Prize laureates, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. Welcome to the Nobel Prize Dialogue in Sydney. We are pleased to be here for the very first time, as you heard, at the Nobel Prize Dialogue in Australia. 2 weeks ago, we announced this year's Nobel Prizes. This is a historical milestone. Over 1,000 people or organizations have received Nobel Prizes since the first prize in 1901. The prizes this year have recognized the discovery of microRNA and its huge potential for improving human health. In literature, Han Kang was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. She is the first person from South Korea to receive this honor. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Nihon Hidankyo, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For the first time, artificial intelligence was recognized, a historical milestone in both physics and chemistry. And in economics, the prize was awarded to economists for providing new insights into why there are still vast differences in prosperity between nations. A big clue is the different types of institutions created by the European colonial powers. Many of the prizes link to the reason that we're here today to talk about the future of decision-making. It is a big year for elections worldwide, but democracy is in decline. Geopolitical tensions are rising, and artificial intelligence is likely to affect decision-making in profound ways. During the coming 2 hours, we will discuss what shapes our decisions and how we navigate the digital age. And I look forward to learning more about how our decision-making process can evolve to deal with global challenges in the future. The Nobel Prize is named after the inventor and entrepreneur Alfred Nobel. His vision for the Nobel Prize was to recognize the remarkable achievements and people who have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. The Nobel Prize is about human progress. We who work with the Nobel Prize know that the Nobel Prize and the achievements of the laureates inspire young people all over the world. And that's why we facilitate dialogue like this one to show the importance of staying curious and open, but critically minded. Many of you that are here today are students, and we love to have you as our audience. Nobel Prize laureates again and again emphasize the importance of students, since the future lays in your hands. I dare to say that they are as thrilled to meet you today as you are to see them. I would like to give a special thanks to UNSW, to Verity Firth, Vice President, Societal Impact, Equity and Engagement, Attila Rungs, Vice Chancellor and President, and to David Gonski, Chancellor. Nobel Prize Dialogue Sydney 2024 is organized by Nobel Prize Outreach and UNSW with the support of Nobel International Partners, 3M, ABB, EQT, Scania, and Stegra. And also special thanks to the Embassy of Sweden, Canberra. Now I have the great pleasure of inviting Nobel laureate Brian Schmidt to the stage. Brian was awarded the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics, together with Saul Perlmutter, for the discovery that the universe is not just expanding, but the expansion is accelerating. This fundamentally changed our understanding of the universe. Textbook had to be rewritten. Since becoming a laureate, Brian has been a vocal proponent of climate action, reducing risk of nuclear war, and the importance of science in society. Brian has also served as the 12th Vice Chancellor of the ANU. So please give a big hand to Brian Schmidt. Thank you, Brian.
Auntie Maxime, I wanted to thank you for your welcome, and I pay my respects to you and to elders past and present. So I'm going to start with 1967, the year I was born, in the state of Montana, USA. This is 4.5 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis brought us as close to nuclear war as we probably ever have known. The Cold War was full throttle, which I never forgot because Minuteman missile silos were in my backyard and all around. The next year, 1968, well, this was a year of great change. Around the world, mass protests broke out, largely by young people. In the US where I lived, but here in Australia, Western Europe, as well as Northern Ireland, Mexico, Brazil, and even within the Soviet bloc, Prague, but also Warsaw in Yugoslavia. The protests were a symptom that young people were not happy with the status quo. These protests caused death, destruction, and misery, but they also provided the impetus for collective decision-making that set the stage for the world to go through a period of growth and our collective prosperity unparalleled in human history. This included, in 1968, the drafting of the Non-Proliferation Nuclear Weapons Treaty, which stands to this day. It included the expansion of the civil rights of minority groups and women, not just in the US, but also in many countries around the world, including a start here in Australia. And it was the beginning of the environmental movement, all within that short period of about 12 months. Now, many of the protests were directed against suppression and war, and here the protests were, arguably, at least in the short term, less successful. But they did set the stage for what was a very good rise of democracy in the years that came, as shown in this graph. The Vietnam War was delegitimized by these protests within the US and its allies, and while the war took a long time to scale down as killing continued to 1975, it was the last giant war that we have had. We've had many terrible conflicts since, but the world has largely avoided the massive conflicts that plagued humanity from 1915 to 1975. Now, when I was born in 1967, there were 3.5 billion people on the earth. And in 1968, the book, The Population Bomb, laid out a dire future for humanity as we were seemingly going to overwhelm the resources of Earth with our sheer numbers, with mass starvation on the horizon. My parents had a copy of this book, and I remember reading it when I was 13, and I have to admit I was a bit freaked out by it. But the Green Revolution, powered by decades of agricultural research, well, it swept across the planet and thankfully has enabled humanity thus far to postpone the sustainability crisis for most of the Earth's 8.2 billion inhabitants. Over that time, despite more than doubling of the population in my 57 years on Earth, poverty has been substantially reduced worldwide. Now let's move the clock forward to 2024. I fear we have begun to lose our way once again in our global decision-making. The rise of democracy has ended and it's beginning to fall away. If we go through and look at armed conflicts, deaths and armed conflicts have in the last 10 years taken a terrible upturn, with the current wars in the Middle East and Ukraine making news on a daily basis, and the civil wars of South Sudan and Myanmar still happening, although more invisible, with tens of thousands of civilians cruelly dying, with no end in sight and seemingly no will to stop. Nuclear non-proliferation. Well, the world can be proud that it set in reverse nuclear proliferation starting in 1968. But we have had recent nuclear states emerge, North Korea, but also Pakistan and India, all expanding their arsenals, and now an old state, China, looking to increase its stockpiles to more closely match that of the United States. Non-proliferation is seemingly off the agenda of the world's governments, but it is not off the agenda of the world's people. And I was very gratified to see the Nobel Peace Prize given this year to Nihon Hidankyo, because indeed, nuclear weapons must never be used again. Global nutritional sustainability is once again under threat. Our agricultural productivity is not increasing fast enough to meet the needs of the additional 1.5 billion people set to join the planet by 2050. And this is even more true when we look at the headwinds caused by climate change, as well as water and soil resource degradation. Humanity, despite an almost 50-year warning, has not managed to limit the increase in greenhouse gases. Indeed, in the last decade, the CO2 content in the atmosphere has increased at the highest rate in measurement history. Our global mean temperature surpassed 1.5 degrees total warming just this year, many, many years earlier than anticipated. And while I hope that this is just a blip, I fear it might not be. Humanity, through arguably one of our most prosperous times in our history, has started once again accumulating risks that we should all find scary. But it's not hopeless. But neither is it, as we say here, a she'll be right moment. We must act definitively, like in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and collectively. Because we never want to see one of these again. We need to make it a priority amongst the nations of the world to decrease arsenals, put in place measures that help make sure that nuclear weapons are not used by intention or by accident, and that stop new nation states from wanting to gain nuclear weapons, and help convince existing nations to decrease or eliminate their existing stockpiles. We made progress in the height of the Cold War on this, and we can make progress again if it is a priority. In my opinion, nuclear war ultimately remains at the top of humanity's existential risk list. Food security. The food security of the world is once again on the horizon. We need a green revolution 2.0. Or in 2050, the alarm sounded in the population bomb may well come back to bite us. Our agricultural productivity is not keeping pace with what we need to feed the extra 80 million people inhabiting the planet each year, let alone dealing with the headwinds of climate change. Now, agricultural research may not be the sexiest topic, but it is important. And the research is not just STEM, because we need to ensure that the food that is grown is actually able to be used by those in need. This is an eminently doable project, but it's one that is 25 years long and will need to involve players across the entire world. So the question is not how to do it, it's the question, will we do it? It will not just emerge, it requires effective global action. Climate change is a big, wicked problem. It could well precipitate conflicts, including nuclear war or mass starvation. Lowering our emissions is no longer sufficient. Yes, we still need to do it as fast as we can, but we need to not just quit emitting CO2. We actually are going to have to start removing it from the atmosphere. And the climate has already changed and will change more, so we must work on adaptation, figuring out how to cope with a world whose climate is just different than what we're used to from the past. Now, if there is one problem that should unify everyone on the planet, it is living sustainably on Earth. But how do we get the institutions of the world to work together to deal with issues that our collective efforts can almost certainly largely mitigate? Well, the internet and the World Wide Web has, in theory, made collective decision-making so much easier. Every person has a voice, has access to almost the entirety of humanity's knowledge, and has the ability to communicate with literally any other person on the planet. We can share, know, and act together in a way that simply has not been before possible. But in practice, the internet has allowed disinformation to take hold, for expertise to be disintermediated, and for everyone to pick and choose their own version of truth. And no, this is not telling you to go out and get a vaccine. This has effectively allowed everyone to go and pick their own version of truth based on their own priors, leading to a polarized world that is fragmented around different worldviews, rather than bringing it together as I had hoped. The internet has made each of us an information superpower, but we do not yet collectively have the skills and critical thinking to effectively use this superpower. The internet has turned from opportunity to a curse. I believe a solution is working to enable every person to be able to effectively interact with humanity's collective wisdom. This means educating young, and it is the young in practice who will educate the old, to be able to critically interact with information and therefore be more immune to manipulation. With the rise of generative AI, able to personalize disinformation en masse, regulation is certainly going to be required. Disinformation is a cancer. It's the enemy of humanity. And in the same way that free speech does not allow you to yell fire in a theater, it deserves no protection. If we can control disinformation enabled by the internet and AI, then these tools open the possibility of educating and assisting billions of people to make sensible decisions together. Utopia? Yeah, perhaps yes. But I have been impressed by the way that citizen juries are able to make robust and sensible decisions when average people are simply able to interact with accurate information. Imagine such a process, integrated into local, national, and international governance at a scale only a computer could possibly manage. I believe this is not utopia, it is possible, and the curse of the internet and AI can be reversed. So let's come back to 1968. A positive lesson of 1968 is that the will of the people can be very strong and influential. But I live in hope that we can make our voices heard today in a way more peaceful than that tone. And not just for a year or two, but for every generation that follows. This is ultimately our planet. We have no plan B planet. We have to all learn to live on it together sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to welcome on stage Tawakkol Karman.
Hi, how are
and
you?
Megan Davis. And we're going to have a session now on democracy reimagined, new thinking for the 21st century. And we're open for questions as well. We have a slider where you can go. So are we up now? Yeah, to ask audience questions. So get that on your phone, start putting in some questions, and we'll come to that shortly. So, and thank you both for joining us. And Megan, you're a leading voice in the push for constitutional recognition. We're going to have a conversation first with Tawakkol, and then we'll come to you. But feel free to jump in whenever you like on anything. So, now Tawakkol, you were the first woman from the Arab world to receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes! Thank you.
You received the award for helping catalyze the Arab Spring back in 2011. You are from Yemen. You're a journalist, an activist, a force for nature, and your cause is peace, democracy, women's rights, the freedom of expression. And what you've done is just absolutely incredible. But now we're going to go straight in at the deep end here. Yeah. Because you always said the Arab Spring was the start, not the end of the road to democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And now, when you look at the Middle East today, and it's hard to even describe the pain that we're all feeling for what is happening there. What do you think needs to happen, and where do you see hope that we can stop the violence, have peaceful dialogue, and make progress?
Okay, hi everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. I'm so happy to be here in Australia, this very beautiful country, and I am really fall in love with this country, really, especially with the old trees. And I will start answering this question as a mother of 4 kids and as a woman, to say that we women and we mothers know how much it's pain when you give birth to a child. So what we are witnessing in Arab Spring countries, it's the same pain of giving birth to a new countries. So this pain, it is a result of our dream, our brave, our courage to demand and to call for freedom, justice, democracy, and rule of law in an absolute dictatorship system in our region. And in Arab Spring countries, we are surrounded by the monarchies, and that led the counter-revolution. and other countries, authoritarian, such as Saudi Arabia and Emirates. Saudi Arabia and Emirates, and other authoritarian regime like Iran. So those three countries who led the counter-revolution doesn't want democracy in our countries, doesn't want democracy in the region. So they don't want the democracy as a value, because it will be a good example, and they are afraid for the revolution itself. So when we dare to dream, and when we dare to sacrifice, and when we dare to create that peaceful revolution, we win in the first step of the revolution, first step, which is every revolution has a very many steps. And the first step of the revolution is step down the dictator. And this is what we did. We forced 7 dictators to leave the authority during just less than 12 years. Imagine that. Imagine that.
Incredible. Yeah.
So we have a very important victory in this step. Now there is the second step, which is an absolute destiny for every revolution around the world, all the history. Every nation, every revolution faced by counter-revolution. So the counter-revolution caused all this chaos. And anyone who really studied the Arab Spring, he will say that during the transitional period, we did a great progress in writing constitutions that guarantees the values and principles that we were talking about, in guaranteeing freedoms to everyone in our countries, in all the Arab Spring countries, and also to guarantee to provide economic stability. It's during 3 to 4 to 5 years of the transitional period. There was mistakes. Absolutely, there was mistakes. But it was just mistakes the people in the power committed during the transitional period. But who did the crime? The failure that you say now, it is not the result of the revolution. It's the result of the counter-revolution who rules now. The leaders of our countries who are result of military coups or militias or the remain of dictators, they are the ones who wage wars, who make civil wars, who support terrorism, etc., etc. So this pain, it's absolute destiny for any great change. Will we give up? Will we just cry? Will we say this is the ultimate result? No. The result is that we are now still in the revolution. We are still sacrificing for freedom and democracy and justice. And absolutely we will win this battle. Absolutely. We didn't give up and we will not give up. And you from Britain, and you for all the people who are here in Australia and in West, do you think that you make revolutions or change and democracy come at 1 year? 1 year? And you tell us that in Arab countries, okay, what is democracy? What is democracy? You take decades, 100 years to reach to democracy. And lectured us, where is democracy? You failed. No, we didn't fail. We are there and we will win this battle.
And
Yeah.
And in fact, the Nobel Prize in Economics this year went to 3 academics for looking at how the institutions created by Europeans around the world in the colonial, in the colonies, how those institutions are affecting the possibility for success and failure today. It's long-lasting. It goes on for centuries. The impact of these institutions that have been put in place.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. Do you know the dictators itself in our region and in all Africa and in Latin America and is the result of the colonial system. Is the result of them. When they left, when they didn't think that this country belonged to them, they make the heritage is with the collapsed institutions. And this is one of the reasons why you see Africa is a country that suffers from poverty and tyrannies. And in Latin America, people are suffer from tyrannies. And here in Australia, for example, it's one of the strong nations that heritage the stable institutions. Why? Because those colonials say so to the Australia as their own country. They settle here as their own country. So when they left it, they left their own country. They didn't left the other countries. So it's yes, we are suffering from Western betrayal, Western colonial, and from the authoritarian regimes. But again, people around the world give up from all this mess. So we are, and because of that, now you see a lot of people in Africa, and this is a very big dilemma, making, there's military coup inside Africa now, starting with the Congo and other countries, and those army said that, okay, now we are on the fight for sovereignty, because those dictators has allies and they are agents of the colonial powers, while we shouldn't put people in this to choose between military coup or between military coup or dictatorship or whatever. No, sovereignty means democracy. So there is no that, collapse. The one thing who give this message is the colonial power.
And so what do we need to do now that is going to make a difference? What do you think is your drive now to keep that pressure on, to push for democracies in the Middle East? And how can the international system, the United Nations and elsewhere, support that?
We have many things to do. First, we as people, we in Middle East and people around the world shouldn't give up our dream, shouldn't give up our hope, and shouldn't give up our belief in the victory. This is very important. And we have to unite ourselves in front of this unification of authoritarian regimes, because in the current situation now, all authoritarian regimes are united. There is a unified camp of the authoritarian regimes, while the democratic regimes are becoming divided and weaker than before. So first, it's for us, from us as a people. We shouldn't give up. Second, and this is what I'm always focusing about the rule of the democratic countries. Why I'm focusing on the democratic countries, because those democratic countries, they are the one who put themselves as the one who protect democracy and as the one who protect human rights, while they are really the real attackers against democracy and human rights. When they make alliance with the dictatorship in our countries, and when support corruption, and at the same time, when they give up their values and principles of human rights, of equality, of justice, etc. And that is these countries put them in a real danger. Now, the democracy is in decline, not in our countries only, while we are suffering and struggling for democracy, but it's really in a real decline in the Western country, in the democratic countries, and they have to protect their democracy. They have to protect their democracy by reforming their policy, by returning to the values, and by, as I said, stopping supporting dictators. Dictators, they are causing the destabilization in the global peace in general, and also in the national interest of those countries. They are the one who caused the flee of refugees and the big mess of the immigration and refugees. And those far-right extremists use those this, I don't call it as refugee crisis, while the crisis is injustice, is corruption, is tyranny, but they use the hate against refugees, the xenophobia, they used it as a tool for them to rise and to take the power and to undermine the democratic institutions. And so it's very important for democratic countries to stop their bad policies toward other countries and to spread, coexistent acceptance, inclusion, and to stop fear from the others. To stop using refugees and immigrants as umbrella to as a slogan for their elections, to get more. Any one of those politicians use migration or refugees or hate speech, he should be held accountable. So accountability is very important in our countries and in your countries. For example, in the US, while it's very big, decline in democracy, we say it with the accountability. A president like Trump, who is accused by, corruption, by sexual harassment, by et cetera, by attacking the Capitol, until now he couldn't have any kind of accountability.
Yeah.
And George Bush, the one who invaded Iraq under the very biggest disinformation in the world that Iraq has chemical weapons, until now there is no accountability, while he admits that they were lying. So this is very important thing. So what we need from those countries to reform their policies, and we need a very important thing. We need the reforms in the United Nations and Security Council. Yeah. This is a very important thing. If we really want to protect not just democracy, to protect the security, the global security, to protect...
Yeah, absolutely.
To protect the climate, and also to distribute the wealth. We need a real good and justice, distribution of the wealth between rich countries and poor countries. What we need in the United Nations, we need at least we need to remove the veto of the P5 countries. Yes. This veto, they used it to collapse nations. They used it just for the interest of these P5 countries. Now the genocide in Gaza, if there is a real just international system, this genocide will be stopped.
Yes.
Or before the genocide in Rohingya, et cetera. So this is what we need if we really want to protect democracy and global peace.
Yes. And absolutely. Leaders can just act with complete impunity at the moment, and this has to change. We're not going to make progress without it. And we'll come back to this. And I'd like to bring Megan Davis into the conversation. And again, your point on so-called strong democracies, how they're working, how they can be improved. Democracy is not an end point, it's always a work in progress. But you're a leading voice in the push for constitutional recognition of Indigenous Australians and have played a crucial role in shaping the national conversation on this issue. Now here in Australia, you've just been through a major national referendum, and you may need to explain this to the international audience, but why did Aboriginal peoples choose the voice, as it's called, a more enhanced role in democratic decision-making?
Yeah, so for your international audience, from about 2010 till last year, there was quite a lengthy process of what we call constitutional recognition, so seeking to recognise First Nations people in the Australian Constitution. That was important because the Australian Constitution, from its kind of enactment in 1901, excluded Aboriginal people from the constitutional order. It was corrected in 1967 at a referendum, but that referendum kind of reversed the exclusion, but it didn't empower Aboriginal people or recognise them in any particular way. And so there was multi-party support among the political parties in our democracy for the recognition of First Nations people. And in 2010, they sought to set up a process, and that process, there were multiple processes, I think something like 8 processes and 10 or 11 reports over a decade, quite a lot of public policy work to get the nation to constitutional recognition. So that's the kind of backdrop to, the referendum last year, 12 years of work. And your question is, why did Aboriginal people seek a voice? So when the nation or the leaders came to First Nations people in 2010, 2011 and said, we want to recognise First Nations in the Constitution, what does that recognition look like? The first process didn't actually go out and talk to Aboriginal communities and ask them what they wanted as a form of recognition. And so about 5 years later, another process was set up to go out and ask people what they wanted. And that was the process I was involved in, which was a deliberative democratic process that ran a series of dialogues across the country, engaging a selection of representatives from different regions in a conversation about constitutional recognition. And in that process, what became very apparent was that people sought, I guess, for want of better words, a more enhanced role in democratic decision-making about their communities and their lives. And that's where the voice effectively came from. I mean, it's not new, novel or original. So I mentioned the 1967 referendum, which reversed the exclusion of First Nations peoples from that constitutional order. Since 1967, governments have always set up some sort of mechanism because they knew, and when I say governments, I should say the federal constitution, the federal Commonwealth government, has always set up some sort of mechanism so that they could get the opinion of First Nations people on laws and policies since that time. And this particular process and the advocacy for the voice was something where First Nations people said, look, we think our voice in Australian democracy is really important. We're obviously a very small number in a very large population, and for many parts of our population, very vulnerable communities as well. And so we would like some space in the Constitution to say, actually, when laws and policies are made about your life, we will ask you what you think, which was effectively what the voice was. There are some, not all, who were surprised that it wasn't something like a treaty agreement. You hear a lot of people talk about treaty, but treaty was not ranked as highly as this. I think that's probably because the people who participated in the dialogues came from communities where their lives are just so incredibly subjugated by bureaucracy and the decisions that are made about their lives and the autonomy that they have to make decisions about community resources, where those resources go and how to address and solve the problems that are endemic in their communities. Those decisions aren't generally made by them. And that was at the core, I think, of the voice. It was First Nations people saying, actually, we want a permanent and durable role in democratic decision-making in the Australian system. And but the answer from the Australian people was no.
And then how are you feeling now about that process and the role of, people talk a lot about deliberative processes and citizens' assemblies and these other ideas to bring them into democracy and obviously referenda as well, combined. How do you think about these processes now? What's your reflection on the result, which is clearly very disappointing?
So my view on the process that led to First Nations people choosing a voice, is that the process was a really exemplary process based on a lot of work and research around what deliberative democratic processes had worked in other parts of the world, including in Australia. And what we wanted to do in that process was allow, so we'd just gone through about 5 years of the Commonwealth just asking experts what they wanted in terms of recognition and not communities. And what we wanted to do, given that the Constitution had such a negative impact upon our mob people for so long, we wanted to design a process that allowed people to feel like they were in control, that it wasn't top down, but it was bottom up. And so every single aspect of the design process, and we took probably just over 12 months to design it. And I remember at the time, in particular the Murdoch press saying, "Why are you taking so long? Why are you taking so long?" But we had to travel around the country. We had to talk to mob, like our people, and say, "We're going to run this process. We know you don't trust government. We know you don't trust the process. But constitutional recognition is an offer on the table from the Australian people via their representatives. We need to ask our mob what they want, what they think meaningful recognition is, because the most minimalist form of recognition is, well, the dictionary meaning is acknowledgement, right? So when, in the early days when you talk to Australians, what does recognition mean? They think acknowledgement, which is like a statement in the Constitution or what we call a plaque, something that just says, hey, they were here, they're still here. But a little bit more elegant than that. But our people said they didn't want that form of recognition because it doesn't do anything to empower communities. It doesn't compel the government to do anything. It doesn't prevent the government from doing it. It doesn't do anything other than provide poetry, and they didn't want it. And at the time, the research showed Australians agreed. So Australians were like, yeah, you don't want to go all the way to a referendum to have something that's not meaningful, that's not going to make a difference. And so we designed the process, we selected the regions, we engaged each of the regions so that they could choose the people who participated. So we were very hands-off on that. So we were definitely involved to the point that we engaged with the opposition leader and the Prime Minister about what forms of recognition we could take to communities. But we chose the regions, we engaged those leaders in those regions because we thought it was really important that our people had people they trusted and knew, people who knew their names, people who worked amongst them. You know, these were not dialogues that involved, you know, what you would call, I guess, elites in our community. This involved people that you never see in the paper, who never get to talk, you know, or express their view. We wanted to make sure it was the people who don't have the fancy passes to get into Parliament House and lobby. It was the people who never get to have a say. And that was really critical for us, for this process. And that's what happened across the country. And through that process, those people chose the voice or the voice to Parliament, a more clear and durable role in Australian democracy as what they thought was meaningful recognition to them.
I think it's really, if you allow me to add something, it's shocking me that still Indigenous people here in Australia are still struggling for just the right of recognition in the Constitution. That is shame, really, that until now you didn't have this right, and keep struggling for that. Don't give up on this. And this remind me also how the Indigenous people, you know, really, really suffer from governments in general and from the multinational corporation. I visited Indigenous people in Honduras and Guatemala, Guatemala. And I saw how, oh my God, how they suffer from this multinational corporation that first steal their land, second create great pollution to them and to the water, to the air and everything. And so we need accountability. We need really, I think the most important solution that we need in this world is accountability.
Yes.
Those who attack climate, who attack our, planet, ecosystem, and biodiversity should be held accountable. Those who invade lands and, perpetrate violence against people, they have to face accountability. The war criminals have to face accountability. So, in addition to the recognition, let's make it also, I don't want to say that, but we have to apologize to indigenous people in those countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go to the audience for question and answers in a second, but I'll ask one question to both of you. And Brian has already raised it on misinformation and disinformation and the digital revolution. And this is a big
topic.
A favorite topic. It's a big question. It's making a mess of so much and ripping apart so much that is good in democratic societies. Where do we go?
Look, this is also one of the challenges that faces the humanity now. This technology that should be served in the good way, now it be used in a wrong way. So while it's a very important, it's the bliss that give it's all generation that we in this, in this age, benefit from. So, but with this disinformation, with the misinformation, with the hate speech instead to the disinformation and misinformation, and also because of the big tech companies that they seek just to the profit more than spreading the expression rights and the peace and love between people. If they really focus on how to use these platforms to be for people to live with each other, they will make a very important methods to fight disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. But they don't. The things that they make with their logarithm, sorry for my English, so it is just something that just increase their profits, than increase the knowledge and increase the peace and the coexistence. This is number one. And number two, which is very important with the technology. And now the technology become a tool of the oppressors. Now the authoritarian regimes use this technology to attack their opponents and also have a relationship with those, big tech companies and make spies, programs against those people. So this is one of the disadvantages of these platforms. But at the same time, we have to teach our people, our young people, ourselves, how to be skeptical of this information, how to read many resources, how to search for truth, how to don't accept anything to come with us as something, as the truth. We have to be skeptical, and we have to work for that very much, and we have to use it. It must be our tool. Let it to be our tool for spreading peace, for fighting corruption, for defending on human rights, for fighting climate change, for our issues, not only the tool of the authoritarian regimes or the oppressors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, where do you start? I think you're right. Social media is such an important tool.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you can, go on and tell a journalist what a terrible article they've written and how it's not factual. You never had that in the old days, right? You've got that ability to advocate for that, and other people see it, and it has a huge impact on how people read things and read policy and understand the world. But obviously it has taken a more sinister turn in terms of misinformation, disinformation. I think for our referendum, I was really gobsmacked by just how much the media was a conduit of the misinformation that the No campaign for the referendum was able to execute, and how little Australians were able to seek out information that would, provide a more factual, balanced approach. For our referendum, there were some major narratives and messages that still the Australian people haven't been corrected yet. Things like that a majority of Aboriginal people didn't support it, which was not true. And our research pre-referendum has stood up in the post-referendum environment. Something like over 80% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people supported the voice. In territories like the Northern Territory, I think it was something like 19 of the 20 ballot boxes all voted yes. It was something our people supported. Things like it would disrupt our democracy. I mean, I remember very early on, before the referendum even started, the No campaign started just pushing, they set up on Facebook a referendum news site that people used as the legitimate news source, not knowing who it came from. And they just started churning out material saying the referendum was divisive. And before it was even called, media was saying, so, how do you feel that it's so divisive? And I'm like, it hasn't even started. The opposition leader attacked the integrity of our electoral commission, which is one of the best, if not the best in the world. It never stopped the misinformation. I mean, I think one of the reasons it lost probably is because of the lack of bipartisan support, but that doesn't explain it entirely. Misinformation had a huge impact on this referendum, and there were no experts, no lobbyists, no one within the system who was in that space with us could provide us with any information on how to combat it or how to deal with it themselves. We tried to get some regulation brought in to for example, the referendum pamphlet, we asked the government to allow it to be fact-checked so that the No case couldn't just send out lies to every single Australian letterbox. They didn't. They wouldn't. But they're regulating for their own, they're going to regulate for their own election, and the Queensland government's regulated for their own election. So we suffered that, but the regulation is going to kick in now because they don't want it to impact their own electoral fortunes.
Let me jump in the regulation, because this is a very important. Very quickly. I absolutely. I have very big opposition about the disinformation, what is happening now in the social media platforms. But it's very important when we talk about disinformation and misinformation and regulation to be careful, because now they use these regulation to limit the expression rights. Now there is a deterioration in this field. So governments, including Europe, do something, some regulated, some laws that really will lead to the attacking the expression rights under the umbrella of disinformation, fighting disinformation and misinformation. And we see that in India. Yep. Now they have, and we have a lot of examples on that. So we have to be careful when we talk about regulations, that we don't want these regulations to be the tool of governments of practicing censorship, very strong censorship on the expression rights. Fighting disinformation and misinformation and hate speech is something else than putting limits and,
I don't think, for us, we're not talking about censorship, we're talking about fact-checking.
Yeah.
Yes, that's...
So if we move to questions... Thank you. So we have, in fact, we have some questions here, but we also had two students who submitted questions in advance, and I think we have, is Ella Screever?
Drivers, but that's okay, no one ever gets it right. Hi, I'm Ella, I'm a law student, so it's really lovely to speak to you. You vaguely touched on this, Megan, but I wanted to ask a question about the Voice to Parliament. So we saw in the Voice to Parliament No campaign, they were constantly coming out with some catchy slogans like, if you don't know, vote no. And obviously saying no is much easier than facilitating change. So I wanted to ask you if you think it's possible to create space for nuanced debate and conversations around major democratic issues.
It's a good question. It's a really good question. And I think one of the things around deliberative democracy is that many nations are trying to introduce different forms of kind of citizen publics and other things to allow for that. And I think that's really critical. And certainly for our own mob and our discussions at the First Nations dialogues, we don't all agree. And not everyone agreed on what the direction was, but the way we set up the dialogue enabled us to come to a historic consensus on what people wanted. And so I think the Uluru Dialogues are a really good example of a deliberative democratic process that worked. It's just going to take some time, I think, for the nation to really understand what happened, and that, you know, the voice wasn't a politician-led thing, but actually it came from a pretty incredible Australian innovation that the nation doesn't quite get yet. Mainly because they don't know, right? The research now shows that they don't know what the Uluru Statement was. They don't know what the First Nations dialogues were. And they don't know that the voice didn't come from politicians, that it came from mob and communities. So the research shows that the fundamental facts of what led to the voice to Parliament, a lot of people don't know. And that could be because we didn't have enough time. Yeah, maybe it should have been a second-term referendum to educate Aussies on the facts. It was a bit of misinformation, but like lots of reasons. But I think it's an important question because of how critical it is to be able to have citizens participate outside of just, you know, the ballot box mechanism, right? We're told that mostly our participation is at the ballot box every 3 or 4 years. But what you're seeing clearly in Australia and definitely around the world is citizens saying that's not enough. And we can see that the primary political parties have an allegiance to other stakeholders that might not be citizens, that we're not privy to, that we don't get to see. It's not transparent. There's not a lot of accountability. So I think increasingly you'll see, and in Australia, mechanisms set up so that citizens can do that and have those respectful spaces that you're talking about. So, and just on Australia, we are working with the 6.2 who voted yes to have those conversations with the people who didn't vote yes, but we won't be doing them in a way that it'll be quiet in 151 electorates where we have those conversations, and the next iteration of the movement is not one that we allow politicians to destroy.
Thank you. Thank you. And if we could have Leda Dowling's question very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, Tawakkol. Thank you for all that you do and all of your advocacy. I can only hope that one day I can be as brave and as bold as you. Yeah. I am an Afghan refugee and asylum seeker. I arrived to Australia by boat from Indonesia, where my family migrated to. I have lived here for over 12 years, almost, yet I find myself without a voice in our political and democratic system, despite studying, living, and working alongside everyday Australians. I do not have the right to vote because I am classified, quote unquote, as an illegal maritime arrival. I represent the voices that often go unheard. My question to you is, how can we create or improve our democratic system to include more voices and also rebuild trust in democracy?
First, how do you describe yourself that you don't have a voice while you stand here with that big confidence, with that big voice? Big greetings. Thank you so much. And just continue. Continue rising your voice, be brave, and really the democratic countries really need great reforms. I don't talk about authoritarian regimes because I am in a very direct battle with them. Starting from Putin until the smallest dictator in the world. I have that direct, and I promised myself and my people that I will stand in front of any dictator around the world until I or their people put an end to them. This is my first battle. Now the second battle is with the democratic countries. And here, your people, you have a very big responsibility because you have to protect this democracy. If this democracy fails, everything around the world will fail. Democracy is the solution for all the crises. Don't think that the democracy is the problem. And anyone said the democracy didn't give us the solution or it is a weak tool. No, they don't know the real democracy. What is practiced now, even in the well-known democracy, it is not the full democracy that all people look for. Democracy means freedom of expression. Democracy means accountability. Democracy means freedom of gathering. Democracy means the division of institutions. Democracy means the independence of judiciary. Democracy means a lot of things. Democracy means justice. Justice, equality. And now this deterioration in the democratic camps because they give up. They give up their values and demands. So don't think that if you silence, that you give a benefit for you or your family. No, you are participating in destroying this very important thing that will save the world. So it's very important for all of us and everyone here. You have to take this responsibility. Don't allow people to how can I say it بالإنجليش بعربي بالإنجليش يكفروا بالديمقراطية. Don't let people think that the problem is with democracy. No, the problem is with the lack of democracy. We should work together to protect democracy, and with this unified voice, we will be able to face all other deterioration, and especially the dictatorship camps.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tawakkol Karman, Megan Davis.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you very much, everybody.
Hi, Verity.
And welcome to the second panel for the night. Facts, Fiction and Critical Thinking with Tim Minchin and Saul Perlmutter. The ability to think critically is essential to navigate our world, to make good decisions and to solve some of the world's most intractable problems. Now, I don't think our guests need any introduction, but I'll do a quick introduction. Of course, Saul Perlmutter is the Nobel Prize laureate who shared the physics prize with Brian Schmidt, who you heard earlier, for the discovery of the accelerating expansion of the universe. And Tim Minchin is a multi-award winning writer, composer, comedian, actor, and fierce defender of facts, the scientific process and logic. That if you've got questions of your own, you can do it through Slido, but let's just kick it off and start with you, Saul, and then we'll open it up a bit more broadly. So, you and Brian actually both independently discovered that the universe was expanding, and the rate that
actually. So, carry on.
And the rate that it's expanding is accelerating. Whilst you were undertaking that work, did you feel that it was Nobel-worthy? You must have thought it was a bit Nobel-worthy, didn't you?
Well, I think when you start these kinds of projects, you're excited by the actual science that you're trying to do, and I don't think it ever occurs to you that you'll possibly end up with a Nobel Prize result. And to some extent, it was a very exciting project. We thought we were going to be able to figure out whether we lived in a universe that was going to expand forever or someday come to a halt and collapse. So, could we find out whether the universe was going to be infinite spatially or whether it was going to last? That seemed like they were just the kinds of questions I would love to answer. And the fact that we happened to come up with a surprise and then that led to a Nobel Prize, that was just incredible. But but certainly at the time we were just focused on the fun of the project.
Yeah. Okay. So in addition to your cosmology work, you've also just written a book, which I encourage everyone to read. I really loved it. It's called Third Millennium Thinking, and in this book you discuss ways to apply scientific thinking to everyday life. Can you share, I suppose, a practical example of how someone might use these skills in their everyday life?
I mean, this particular project came about because I was talking to a number of other faculty in other areas, such as psychologists, a philosopher, and I was saying that it seemed to me that the ways that scientists approach problems in the world just looked very different from the ways that we were seeing our society try and handle problems. And it just looked embarrassing watching society do it when we thought we should be able to do better. So we started asking, well, where do we actually learn this stuff? And we realized that it was not taught in any science course that I knew of, no physics, biology, chemistry course. And so we started to just write down what were these ideas that were being learned essentially by apprenticeship, by osmosis, and could we find a way to articulate them and teach them? So examples, they often had to do with ways in which science has learned over the years that we fool ourselves, and that we have to be constantly watching out for the way that we've fooled ourselves most lately. And so among them, that over the years we've learned to do better, then is that we shouldn't treat the world as if every factual question is something that there's either it's either true or false, and that's all you can use. That basically we've come to understand that you almost never know whether something is absolutely true or absolutely false, and that actually there's a huge amount of information in taking everything in between. So being able to say, well, I'm 90% confident of this, I'm 99.999% confident of that, I would bet my life on it, and I will. I'll get on an airplane and I know those tons of metal will fly. But there are other things that I only have maybe 70% confidence in. And one of the reasons that's so important is because it allows you to be able to change your mind. It means that if you are putting your ego in knowing is it 90% confident or 99% confidence, then that means that when you're 90% confident, 1 out of 10 times you should eventually change your mind if you're going to follow the facts. And that really puts you in a much better position when you're going to talk to other people.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring you in now as well, Tim, because one of the things I really loved about reading your book was you talked about the role of humility, right, in good decision making. And so part of that's curiosity, but it's also humility and having the ability to admit when you're wrong, or to admit when you need to ask questions, etc. So, and in your book you had this wonderful piece where he talked about how politicians aren't very good at doing this, right? So that there's a different whole set of characteristics about being a politician, which is always about projecting confidence. And actually it's the humility and when to admit that you've made a mistake that actually is so valuable to scientific learning and to knowledge and to good decision making. So I want to talk to you, how do we actually make it so that politicians and decision makers in more powerful positions can embody that humility and the ability to make a mistake? And then I want to come to you, Tim, as well, and talk a bit about that as well.
I mean, this is one of these things where, in the end of the day, I think we actually have to educate ourselves as a community, and this is one of the reasons that I've seen this as an education project to a large extent. Is it possible to teach this to all the students to understand that this is actually the way that you tell who's a responsible participant in a conversation, that they are going to be open to figuring out how they're wrong. And in fact, most of us are wrong a lot of the time, and we have to actually find ways to identify that. So that means that we would be the voters someday where when we had a choice between the politician who says, here's a new healthcare system that I'm planning, I can guarantee you 100% that it'll work, versus the other politician who comes and says, I've got a healthcare system I'd like to propose also. I'm 78% confident that it'll work, but what we'll do is we'll keep examining it, and when things go wrong, we will fix them. That you, as a voting body, would choose the one who's 78% confident because the other one is just making it up. So that's the goal.
So how do you think we do this? How do we improve, I suppose, the humility of our leaders?
I mean, I I agree with Saul on everything all the time. Since I met him a few days ago, we haven't yet come to blows. But in my lesser book, I talk about humility. I talk about humility, and people get confused by humility because humility these days, the idea of humbleness is sort of overtaken by like, oh yeah, you know, it's hard being beautiful on the internet or whatever. This sort of performative humbleness. Humility, in the way Saul's using it, has a very specific thing connected to what he was talking about earlier. Really this thing that the philosophy of science, which was I'm bad at science, but okay at the philosophy of science, I understand the functionality of a system that requires you to test your ideas against disconfirming information, right? That is the humility. Look, I'm pretty sure I'm right. I'm 99.9 whatever percent sure, but still I'm going to search for disconfirming information because until I've got all the possible disconfirming data, I can't get my p-value to where I can make a claim, you know. And I talk about humility across all the things. So if you study philosophy or psychology or neurology or anthropology, the deeper you go, the more you find humility. You find neurological humility. You understand that your brain tricks you all the time, that your memories are absolutely shit, that if you guys all witness the same event right now, you'll all have totally different stories, partly because your eyes are over there and your eyes are over there, but partly because of the biases you bring and because your brain, you know, prioritizes things that make you a victim or a hero of the situation. Psychologically, we are constantly tricking ourselves to centralize ourselves in our narratives. You know, epistemologically, we have a sort of way by which we find our way through information. We have a systemic information basis that biases everything we think, and even culturally, of course, we're biased. And so humility is used in those senses. And what Saul's actually doing, and what I bang on about doing, is trying. I think you have to embed it in culture young. We have to make it kind of sexy and fun. It's nothing better than 49-year-old dudes talking about sexy, fun things, like my sexy, fun shoes. Like we have to make it cool again to understand that being wrong is an asset, and performing your rightness. It really, because of lots of factors, but social media being a huge one, really performing your rightness and performing your anger in the face of wrongness has overtaken any progress we were making in the last, a couple of 100 years at saying, oh no, we're all wrong nearly all the time, and we have to always test our hypotheses / our opinions against disconfirming information, which, just to see if I can land this fucking ramble, is actually not just an act of humility, but an act of empathy. I need to stand in the shoes of someone with whom I vociferously and vehemently disagree. I have to figure out why they landed there. I have to spend that. And that's another form of humility. It's like interrelational humility, where you're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. And then we can start asking the politicians to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And some of them do.
Yeah. Tell the story about the Western Australian politician.
I have a friend who's an MP who's the member for Curtin, which was a very, very Liberal seat for a very long time, and is now a Teal seat. And her name's Kate Chaney, and most of you know her. And I actually did one of these on-stage conversations with her, and we really talked about this because she is someone who is on the front page of the West Australian excellent newspaper all the time, and recently got slammed for flip-flopping on something. And she just goes, no, I didn't flip-flop. I was this side of the line. Someone presented me with new information, and I changed my mind. And she just does it in the face of these ridiculous headlines, and it's really admirable and hope-giving.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Now, I'm going to dig a bit more into the artistic endeavour soon.
I think I said it. I'm done. I'm out. I did my one long sentence.
I do want to also explore, but I'll get to that, right? Because the next question I wanted to ask was about time, right? And this I also discussed backstage, which was, I read this fantastic biography of FDR by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and it talked about when FDR had this really tricky public policy problem just before the United States ended the Second World War, and it was how to support the UK whilst not actually being able to by Congress. He went onto a Navy frigate for 6 weeks to think about the problem. And he took his policy experts and they thought for 6 weeks and then came up with a policy solution. And so my question really, it's a wonderful example because they really did use probably the critical thinking methods that you're talking about, but they took the time to do it. And I just want to now quote you to yourself, Tim, because I also read your book, You Don't Have to Have a Dream, where you have this wonderful quote where you say, art isn't any expression of an idea into which you have put a bit of effing effort. It is often the fast-thinking, bias-riddled, adrenalised, dehumanising part of our brain that tweets. It is the slow-thinking, contemplative, creative, self-aware, humanising part of our brain that makes art. So what I want to now ask both of you is, looking at both art and decision-making, how do we create the time to make the good decisions, to create the great art, to make... So how do we create the time in this incredibly fast-paced world, Saul?
Yeah, I'm struck by the fact that I believe he had a major advantage in that time, which is that he did not have email. And
So he had a frigate.
Right.
I tried to spend some time on a frigate. I can't fucking find one. I don't know what a frigate is.
So what do we do?
But no, I think that this whole question of how do you get people to be comfortable with the idea that not everything is going to be figured out instantly is, I think, a huge part of the story. That there's a tendency to think that we have a problem, can somebody tells us how to solve it and then we're done. But my sense is that almost any problem really worth its salt is something it's worth a lot of iteration and a lot of thought about. We were, one of the things we asked our students in this course that we invented was, we asked them, what's the second longest amount of time you've ever spent working on a puzzle or a problem? And we said, maybe second longest just because we didn't want the one time they got obsessed, or something like that. And surprisingly, some people said they spent, hours. Some people said they spent even a few days on it. And, I was just thinking that one of the tricks of the trade of science, as I've seen it as a culture, is that it allows people to fool themselves into thinking they can solve a problem long enough to actually solve it. Because most problems take way longer than a few hours or a few days. I mean, a really good problem, you should be enjoying it for months, years. It could take decades. But that, as long as you're getting a sense of iterative improvement, I think that's something that allows people to take the time to actually do something significant. And I think talking to my friends who are in the arts, people really iterate and they spend time on things. And it's not something that is a fast discovery in a matter of a minute. Every now and then somebody has a great insight, but I'd say that's not really how most interesting problems get solved.
Yeah. It just strikes me listening to you talk with passion about the time it takes to do something that you and Brian did, and listening to Megan talk about the time it required and deserved to make sure the voice was sourced from all across the country, and the absolute devastation. And yes, the time it takes to write a musical or to make an album or to make a piece of art. Sometimes it's just entertainment, sometimes it has ideas in it about which you really care. But all those things then get fed to a monster that wants... That unfortunately, because of the way the monster works, it's fed into the clickbait media and the clickbait machine we call social media. And all that people care about is whether or not this piece of information firms up their identity in their tribe, which has a group of things they believe already, and they'll only admit new information that buoys it, that is bulwark against the possibility of their wrongness. And it's just to hear Megan talk about the voice then going to this referendum that was just poisoned by bullshit headlines, and yes, misinformation, but also just the system of how we talk about things now. It's fast and instant and angry and outrage-driven and clickbait-driven. And then, I mean, I'm sure scientists you think about the vaccines that came out incredibly quickly in the face of COVID, but people had been working on the technology that was the basis of those vaccines for decades. decades. And then to see it like pushed through the filter of every wanker, including me, with their opinion, you know, that the opinion which is arrived at as quickly as possible and with much verve behind it as possible. It's a significant problem that it doesn't matter how long you take with your art, you know, in the end it's consumed very quickly and without much.
The other point that you had made about you know, how important it is to be able to look at what is the people you're disagreeing with, what is it they're thinking, and what are the issues in their minds? That really takes time, right?
That takes a lot of time.
It's so hard to, you know, be able to listen and to learn enough about why is it that, you know, from my point of view, half my country is crazy, you know. But from their
point of view, 3/4 of your country's crazy.
Exactly. But from the other half, you know, I'm crazy, you know. And so there's clearly something there that needs a lot more delving than just, you know, announcing, oh, you know, these people can't be talked to, you know.
But we're doing it less and less, and time is obviously one, you know, matter on the axle, but the other is of course bubbles, and that's that's an hour conversation which everyone in the room can have now because we're so cognizant of how this is working. But not only, people don't feel like they need to take time because everything they think's right there, fed through their algorithms by the people they already agree with. So even if you want to try and figure out what the other side is thinking, it's quite hard to find that. Well, it's not hard to find that information, but we're disinclined to find that information. And I had a B. Oh, and B, it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve your identity or brand to challenge yourself. You these days, if you possibly find out something that the other side is thinking and want to change your mind, you'll be booted out of your little micro tribe potentially.
Your friends,
and you'll lose your mates, so you're not even motivated to do it because there's punishment.
And are there solutions, like, so, all right, being optimistic, and we're about to talk about scientific optimism, but in terms of the sorts of solutions that exist around these sort of tech bubbles that exist and the fact-checking and some of the stuff Megan was referring to earlier, I know that you talked a bit about this at the end of your book, like the way forward. Do you have some suggestions?
I do think there's some very optimistic elements of the story that are out there, where people have actually tried different approaches to solving some of these problems, and I think there's a lot of room to maneuver that people just aren't aware of. This is one of these cases where, you know, it's very hard to solve a problem if you're not aware of the problem, and I think that we've really become aware of the problem in just this past, you know, 5-10 years in a way that I don't think we were before. I mean, we kind of knew that it's difficult to get people to talk, and it's difficult, but I think by now it's pretty clear that it is maybe the problem of our generation, that, you know, if we can figure out how to make this maneuver so that we learn how to talk to each other in a productive, you know, respectful, but, you know, really comprehensive way, I think that I'm not worried about almost any of those other big problems of the world, because we're now very capable. It's just that we aren't capable when we aren't talking to each other, and we aren't able to make the, you know, those kinds of you know, ability to figure things out together. So the examples that I found particularly exciting, you know, include some of the ones that we were just hearing a little about earlier, of these things like deliberative democracy approaches. I'm struck by the fact that when you take a random sample of a population and you give them experts to work with so they can figure out the problems together, they're much, much better at talking to each other than their leaders appear to be. And so that gives some hope that if we can use all these impossible technologies that we've we're so capable now to talk to each other across great distances, if we use it in those ways to empower people to, you know, take advantage of the fact that most people are much better at talking to each other than the political world would make it appear, I think we have a chance.
I agree, and I love, we were talking on the radio the other day, I love hearing Saul talk optimistically, and it's really inspiring because I find it hard to get to that bit because I'm still trying to put my finger on the problem. But that idea that it melds with the first thing Saul was talking about humility and being able to change one's mind, because we did, when the Arab Spring rose, think, oh my God, look what social media can do. And we did, you know, learn that we can talk to journalists and tell them to F off and stuff. Like a bear. I didn't swear that time. Good, Tim. But But we have learnt. We now have 12 years of data since the introduction of the smartphone and and then the like button and the retweet button and all these things that made outrage and started turning the bell curve. The bell curve of opinions on any given issue basically looks like a bell. The bell curve of what we hear about is this. Basically, the extremes are high and the moderates are low, but this is actually how it is in the world. And I think we now know that it's poison, that it is very hard to do the stuff that Saul is talking about, to take the steps, to have the humility, to listen to others, to feel empathy, to place yourself in another person's shoes, which is the job of art, to consider what it might be like to be one another, even if you're still going to end up on the other place, but at least you'll be close enough to talk. The hypothesis was that we all understand as humans, I'll try to just do this little bit in 90 seconds. We understand as humans that proximity is the salve for prejudice. We need to be near each other, we need to hear each other, we need to learn. Wherever there's not proximity, wherever there's a wall or a border or a different treatment or, there is prejudice. We hate each other. And we thought that social media would be a good enough sort of avatar for proximity, that it would make us more proximate, that we would hear from one another and make us a better democracy. It has turned out that the particular algorithms that we've allowed into the world do the opposite. They are dehumanizing mechanisms and extremification robots. And now we know that, and everyone's starting to stomp, and even idiot long-haired musos are starting to say, like, this is terrible. I do think it's a health hazard and it's a hazard to democracy. So talk about accountability. One of the things we have to hold accountable is that these algorithms have been proven to be a hazard to democracy and health, as well as having advantages, but we can keep the advantages and get rid of the outrage bifurcation machine. And I think it's going to happen. I know it sounds like free speech suppression, but I don't think it's that, but that's another 90 seconds.
I think that's spot on, I really do. Now, I don't want to run out of time for the students to ask questions because we've got some pre-submitted questions from students. So I want to come back about scientific optimism, but I'm going to go to the students first. So, the first student, now I have to find the student questions, it was the women that I need to be asking. Oh yes, Kelly Nee submitted a question.
Kelly.
Hello, this is a bit short. I think I'm taller than the last person that used this, but I think it should work.
What a flex.
Thank you so much, Professor Saul and Tim, for your talk. So you all mentioned a variety of disciplines that you all work in. So you mentioned philosophy, physics, and psychology. And I did start reading your book, although I did not finish it on the train today. And Tim, you mentioned this idea that we have to make being humble and this idea of humility being sexy again. So putting that all together, my question for you both was, in this rapidly changing world that we have, how do you both believe that we can integrate these ideas at a foundational level? And what I mean by that is, do you believe that this critical thinking and this interdisciplinary critical thinking should belong in early classrooms? And if so, how can we nurture that so that we can bring that forward into our next generation?
Well, I think the first thing I do is I would just get Tim to go to every classroom as a starting point. I think just by himself, he would do the job. But I was just mentioning that one of the reasons I'm actually here in Australia as well is that the course that we started developing with the psychologist, the philosopher, and myself, the physicist, is a course that we're trying out at the university level. We thought, well, why don't we just find out whether we can teach some of these ideas that aren't usually taught. And we found that it seemed to work well. But of course, really, your point is right, that you want it to be taught much younger. So we thought, well, we worked with the group that we had, but then we start working our way down. And so now we've been developing a high school version of the course, and for the whole group 4 years younger, and working with educators who develop high school programs, and they've taken all the same material and tried to figure out what works well at this younger generation. It's being field tested at schools actually around the world right now, these various units, and we've been doing it with the Nobel Prize outreach group because they managed to reach well, students and teachers all over the world every year with their material. And so that seemed like a likely starting point. And then we've been talking to OECD and UNESCO about the other school systems in the world that might be able to adopt this. So it's, this is definitely one of these quixotic hopes that we get somewhere in the next, 15, 20 years, we have schools all over the world seeing this as just a standard part of an education, that they learn how to think about problems with this kind of intellectual humility, and with many specific elements that we were teaching about. What is it that you look out for, like, that you shouldn't be fooled by random numbers looking to you as if they're patterns. All these different ways that we know that we can fool ourselves, but also the ways in which we know that we have to be able to find other people to help us recognize when we're going wrong, and that the best people to help us do that are the people we disagree with. So I definitely feel like embedding this into our culture in these ways could be a big part of the answer.
Yeah, and and Saul's actually, Saul's doing it. And I have sort of talked about this in public, and I have, just to acknowledge that sometimes I get a bit of like, mate, we're literally educators, like, get out of our turf sort of stuff, which I completely understand. So you have to be very, I don't want anyone to think that I'm going, education's crap, you need to change it. However, I have come to the opinion that critical thinking is probably the most important topic to teach at all. I would have, 5 years ago, I would have said, isn't it unbelievable we're still teaching religion at schools? We should be, religion's a personal thing that you can get at home. You should be getting comparative religion and critical thinking at school, Now I would say, whatever it takes, get rid of maths, like whatever. I don't really think that, but what I mean is I don't see why learning to pass information, and educators are getting onto this, but they're doing a lot of online health, online critical thinking, which is good. But I think there's this foundational, the birthday paradox, and fallacies of causation and correlation. You have a dream and you wake up and you dreamed that your friend had a car accident, and your friend had a car accident. What are the odds? Well, the odds are probably 1 in 100 million, and 1 in 100 million things happen all the fucking time because there's so many things happening all the time. And this is just one. You didn't remember the dreams you had that didn't cause a car crash. Like, all this stuff is fun and awesome and confirmation bias and just nerd stuff, but it's funny and fun, and I reckon, and then from that you can go, and by the way, look at the confirmation bias that the robots are doing. Look at how you're making, you're thinking fallaciously in a digital environment. So, I mean, Saul and I have talked about this a bit over the last couple of days, but I think middle school, but I think you think maybe year 5 and 6 or something like that.
I think we should go way down,
18-month-olds, like confirmation bias blocks, I don't know, as long as I can get some kickback
mobiles
from
over the
money.
crib.
And there's definitely something in the fact that in a world where information is able to be downloaded immediately, these are the sorts of skills you need even more than ever, right?
Absolutely. And, and I've noticed that now, the students that we watch are often teaching themselves lots of the content. That's stuff that you can usually find. It's much harder to find, really thoughtful people talking to each other and showing how that works.
And when I was like cool and hip, I mean, not only do I find this stuff exciting, obviously, as does Saul, and maybe we were talking the other day also, I think there's just a wiring thing, like I'm wired to like this stuff, and other people are like, that is so boring, I want to die. But I also think it's about what we get cred for, and this is a lot further down the track, but people get cred at the moment for being sure and being declarative, and that's good, and certainly in activism that can be very, very important, and it can create good change. But it's mostly not at the moment. Mostly it's causing tribalization. And so the idea that what a cool thing to be sure about is your unsureness, what a cool thing to be knowledgeable about is how hard it is to have absolute knowledge. I don't know how to do that, but it feels accessible to me if you get them young enough.
Right. And it does feel like we've often gone the other way, where we're teaching essay writing that can be show how you give your arguments to prove your point, or a debate course, where it can feel too much like the goal is to win, rather than to try to figure out how you're wrong and what you could learn.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much. That was a brilliant question.
Thank you.
just wanted to say thank you so much, and I think the answer to my question is to clone you both and let you guys teach all our classes.
Cloning.
Which we may be able to do soon, I assume. Arnav Bansal was the next question. Thanks, Arnav.
Hi, thanks for that. So we heard about the importance of critical thinking, but my question was, in a world with constant upheaval, how do you envision humanity's creativity and critical thinking itself changing within the next 50 years? So as a whole, do you believe our critical thinking and decision-making ability will gradually be undermined? Or will our minds evolve and adapt with an increasing affinity to discern information? How can we ensure it's the latter and not the former?
Who wants to go first?
Well, I don't know. I'm 30 years, and then it's all rest for me. I reckon. I'm just hoping to get out unscathed. I am optimistic. Humans, with many, many missteps, do adjust to their threats. So far, we have. I feel like this moment is. I was going to say existential. It's a big moment, and I think I'm buoyed by the fact that people are engaged with it. When we look back at the first 20 years, 25 years of this century, or even maybe the first 20 years of smartphones in our pockets, news being fed at us all the time in clickbait fashion, algorithmic bubbles and stuff. When we look back on it, it might not feel very long. I feel like it's turning now. And I've been talking a lot, and I don't want to get too much into this, so to sound like an old ranting guy on a porch, but about how until I've managed in the last, I'm a year clean I'm off social media and I don't let the news tell me when to read it. And I think I deserve a clap. It's really hard. So my self-esteem was attached to the likes. But it's about agency. It's about, and my kids seem to get it because we've instilled it. But I think parents are now very anxious. So that this next generation of kids are growing up understanding that our generation have discovered it to be wanting at best and dangerous at worst. And so I talk a lot to my kids about agency. You choose when you're going to read the world news. Don't have the news read you. You choose when you want to go look at a cat video. Don't get fed a cat video in the middle of your work, And so I feel like it's as simple as that, to get through this bit where we're being bombarded by digital information that we have no agency in consuming, and then hopefully get back to this place where we can start going, now, let's undo some of that with really trying to instill these values of humility. I mean, it all sounds very highfalutin, but it feels urgent enough that we need global cooperation on big issues at the moment, and it feels like we're so far from that, but it is amazing how quickly humans can turn.
Yeah.
No, I feel actually relatively optimistic about this. I mean, I've been saying this all the time, but I think we're good at this kind of thing. It's just that we're not instant at this kind of thing. And this is just another big set of problems that we've come to recognize as sets of problems. And I think we keep discovering new ways that we fool ourselves and new ways that we learn not to speak to each other. Yeah, and I think that our goal is to constantly catch them and then trying to figure out new ways out of it to do better. It's just that we shouldn't feel demoralized if it takes us more than, as I was saying, a couple hours, a couple days, and in this case, even several years. Yeah. I think we'll figure it out, but then we have to just keep on it, and we can't rest on the laurels ever, because we'll constantly get undermined in some other new way, and then we'll have to figure out a new way to solve it.
Yeah, we are intuitively, we intuitively other the other. And we need to, and culture is about building systems that undermine our intuitive. I don't think we're evil, and I don't think we're good. I just think we have evolved to fear things we don't understand and fear other people, and these things which we thought would bring us together are sending us apart. So we need to get through this little backward step. I see it as a backward step to get back to thinking globally about how we get along better so that we can together deal with the big ones, with AI and nuclear proliferation and climate change, which are things that need global solutions by one group of humans called humans, you know. And I don't know, but one step at a time, I guess, is the answer.
And that is a perfect segue for what's going to be my last question, and it was a question that Saul wants me to ask, so it's completely rigged. But one of the things I really loved in your book is you talked about how do these scientists stay optimistic when it takes like 30 years to discover whatever the great discovery is. And you actually talked about this inbuilt scientific optimism, which is about the iterative process and the sort of excitement of the day. And we were talking about how deadening it can feel at the moment at this point in history, like people don't feel, everything just seems so bad that people almost lose the momentum, or that they feel that change is not possible. And so we want to talk a bit at the end about scientific optimism, and I'll lead off with Saul and then with Tim.
So we've already mentioned a little bit about what I was describing as scientific optimism, this culture, of thinking that problems are worth solving and that you can actually get there iteratively over time. The other element that we're talking about here is that it also comes along sometimes with this extra sense of a can-do spirit and the ability to imagine growing the pie so that people are not in a zero-sum game where they're fighting over every last little thing they have to hang on to, but that instead we try and build things for everybody so that everybody can thrive in a world together. But what I think that sometimes people may miss, because our news feeds are so relentlessly showing us every possible thing that went wrong in the world yesterday and is going wrong in the world tomorrow, but they're very poor about showing us the steady building that people working together around the world for years have managed to take what Brian was showing us of a world where 2/3 of the world were going to bed hungry every night to a time when it's a much rarer thing. Those things are important for people to be aware that we are actually good at solving problems, and I don't think we feel that way. So although at times, we look at global climate change, we look at wars, we look at poverties, and all these situations, it feels like, I think most people have this feeling it's the worst of times, but I think it's also important for people to realize that in some ways it could be the best of times. That I think this is the first generation in history in prehistory, that could, with a straight face, look at each other and say, we now know how to fix the climate. We really know how to feed the planet. We could actually be the generation of people who, once we managed to learn how to talk to each other, could actually make a world that we all were just proud to live in. And I think that's not something that most people recognize, that we live at a really unusual time, that it could be a really scary time, but it could be a time that we felt like we were the generation that got to see the beginnings of a world that you could look around and you wouldn't feel heartbroken to watch what was happening in different parts of the world. You would feel like we live in a world that looks nice, for people. And I think that would be something that would be motivating if people were able to recognize that was also part of our reality, not just all the fears and both those things are things that we can only manage if we then take this one step of figuring out how to engage with each other and how to talk and solve problems together.
I think that's right. I didn't know why I said yes to doing this panel, except that was a huge honor to be asked. But I realize now that God sent me Saul to make me feel better. It has been great meeting Saul to be reminded of that potential. And I think the thing that I say that I think I get in a bit of trouble for is because it appears that I'm criticizing my tribe, progressives and, arty lefties and stuff. But I think I am quite critical of us, if we're us. I'm not assuming anyone's politics, but let's say no one in the room's voting for Trump. Not allowed to, wrong country, but you know what I mean. Maybe someone is, and that would be cool, and I'd love to meet you after if you're voting for Trump. So I'd punch you in the face. No, I'd listen. I'm going to listen. But I think that's because it has to start in our own community. That there is protest and defiance and battles being fought by very serious people and brave people. Most of us are just living our lives and getting distressed online. And I think the first step in what I do think is a possibly optimistic, very exciting couple of generations coming up, the first step is to to look to the self and to one's own community. So rather than going those populist right-wing assholes, which is one thing, how is these mechanisms of division working on me? Where can I have a real look at where, because it is working on the left and it's a bullshit false binary, but you know what I mean. It's working on both ends of this thing. And so I've been trying to check what I'm missing and then just checking what you can do within your community. You know, what can you fix? If you are very distressed by the world but you're not doing anything about it, maybe lower the amount you're getting pulled into that, unless by watching it it's making you donate more or act more. If it's just making you stressed, take some of the time where you're engaging in the difficult stuff in the world and try to turn that time into something positive. And I mean, the lady down the street's struggling with her bags. I mean, I know that sounds unbelievably trite, but when you're looking at your phone, you're not in your community, you're not... I noticed I wasn't being as good a dad. I mean, that was the thing that just made me go, mate, if there's one thing you can do for the world is put good kids into it. And when I'm upset by some arsehole going at me online or reading something absolutely horrendous that I'm not going to do anything about, if I'm honest, or feel no power over, I could be, so it has to start with our own intellectual humility and our own understanding that we're having our attention and our love and our capacity for empathy stolen, and we need to take it back.
Wonderful, thank you. And that's the end of the panel. So another big round of applause for Saul and Tim.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Ray. Well done. Oh, what a panel. And so we're going to welcome on stage for a few final thoughts. We have Saul, we're going to be standing here. We have Saul, we have Brian Schmidt, we have Tawakkol Karman. Now, and continuing a little bit on the theme of optimism, so, you know, the Nobel laureate Dan Kahneman, he was very famously very optimistic, and I think a lot of laureates are optimistic, and this is an interesting phenomenon. And a journalist once asked him, you know, why are you so optimistic? And he said, I'm optimistic because the future is created by optimists. And I'd like to, where do you all find optimism given the challenges we have today?
Well, for me, when you have hard problems, they are interesting to solve, but they are necessary to solve. Going through and not trying to solve problems is futile. It is admitting defeat, and it's not fun, it's not interesting. And so going out and trying to solve climate change, stop nuclear proliferation, get people educated so that they can be responsible, that's fun, it's exciting, and it's useful. So what's the problem with doing it? It's the only sensible thing to do.
Tawakkol.
Because my belief on people. I really have this great optimistic, and because my belief on the new generation. And I saw that in my country while I was alone, and people told me that you will be alone, you will die alone, nobody will follow you, nobody will believe you. But then students being in the street and chant the same chant, and we were together on toppling the dictator, and we did it. So the same thing now. I believe on those new generation. Everywhere, everywhere. I saw this new generation demonstrate hundreds of thousands in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Arab region. All of them, they are calling for justice and for stopping dictatorship. So those generation who will, create the solution. So I believe that those will be the leaders of the future, the change makers of the current, and you have to really to consider yourself as this. You have to create change now, and you have to lead the future, because there is no leadership now. Really, there is no positive leadership. Those leaders cause all this mess. So if you create yourself, educate yourself to be the one who will create the solution, believe me, we will make this world is a better place. And promise me, they will make the solution. I really believe that. Yeah.
But you may have gathered something what I think about this from the conversation. I'll just add that I do think that when you talk to people, on the rare occasion that I get to talk to somebody who is completely out of my bubble, and where I would have thought that I just couldn't understand how they could possibly believe the things they believe, I discover that you talk to them, you realize that they're not that different from me, and they have all sorts of reasons that I think are just mistaken for believing some things they believe, but they are people who fundamentally, if we all were talking to each other a lot, we wouldn't be coming to very different conclusions. We would be likely to be trying to figure something out together. And so I feel that sense of optimism because I think that we just haven't used our communication technologies. We haven't used all the things we now know can go wrong or can go right when algorithms control how we talk. We just haven't used them in positive ways yet that will allow us to take advantage of the fact that most people are actually reasonably able to work together and to talk together and work together. And I think that's where the optimism comes from, that we just have to find the ways to turn that back on again, or turn it on for the first time if we haven't done it yet.
So I'd like to now say some thank yous. I mean, I think this has been an incredible evening. But I'd first like to thank our other guests, Dobby and Megan and Tim and Verity.
Love you so much. Thank you, Tim.
And I'd like to thank our hosts, UNSW. You have been amazing, and the team here, led by Ione and Alice, absolutely incredible team. And I'd like to thank the Nobel team as well, who are all down here. So a round of applause for Nobel and UNSW. And I'd really like to thank Brian Schmidt, Tawakkol Karman, and Saul Perlmutter.
Thank you.
For this evening.
Thank you.
It was good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Those three words are spelled out.